The journal then encouraged me to write down what I thought God might have prepared for me. And I wrote the following. Now remember, this is 5 months earlier. No clue. John 16:33 says, "In this world you will have trouble." Although biblical, this isn't what I dream that God has prepared for me. However, having just finished reading the book of Job, suffering is on my mind. My Bible gives this footnote. Job's greatest test was not the pain, but that he did not know why he was suffering. Our greatest test may be that we must trust God's goodness, even though we don't understand why our lives are going a certain way. We must learn to trust in God who is good and not in the goodness of life. And then I wrote the following prayer. Father, I want to trust that you are good and you are working all things for good in my life, despite how it might appear or feel. I'm not sure I want to know everything you have prepared for me in this life, but I know you have a place prepared for me with you in heaven for eternity. Now, I don't know why I wrote down those things, and all I know is I stopped writing in that journal. I thought, that's enough. Now, when I found out I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, God led me back to my journal and to the things I had written that day. And had I sensed back then that something was wrong? I didn't. Cancer had never even entered my thoughts until the doctor told me. And when I went back to that verse I started with in my journal, John 16:33, I noticed that it actually begins with these words, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace." Isn't that remarkable? God had been preparing me for this moment in advance so that when I got the news, I would have peace. God's love is so great, and He wants us to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that He will never leave us nor forsake us. God also prepared me for this journey by introducing me to a new Christian friend in January. We met her through a small group we were having in our home. Her name is Rose, and I didn't know until I had cancer that she just happened to work at the cancer center. And she was full of knowledge. She was very supportive, encouraging, not to mention entertaining through my chemo treatments. She was exactly what God knew I needed. And again, it was a confirmation God was saying, I'm going to help you. Now, when bad things happen, we often wonder why. Job wondered why. A lot of people ask me, why you? I didn't know why. We had no history of cancer on either side of my family. But for some reason, I didn't even feel like I had to ask why. I knew that God had a purpose for my life, and I chose to trust Him. Now, during my treatments, I read a book called The Shack. And in this book, the author addressed the question of why bad things happen. Bad things like illnesses, accidents, and even death happen because this world is in darkness and chaos. It's not God's plan for mankind, but it's the work of evil, and no one is immune to it. But praise the Lord, God promises to be with us through it all and to give us the strength to endure. Now, I received many cards, calls, emails from friends and family members, and one dear friend wrote this verse, John 11:3 and 4. It says, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, when I heard and when I read it, my heart rejoiced and united with him. I said, you know what? This is for God's glory. And now I knew why I was suffering, why I was going through this. It was for God's glory. Throughout my journey, God spoke to me in many ways. I mentioned He spoke to me through His Word and through my journal, my friends, my family, books, Christian books. Well, God also spoke to me through a dream. Shortly after I found out I had cancer, I had a dream that I was on a roller coaster. I used to like roller coasters. However, as I get older, I find I'm not as brave as I used to be. And I was on this roller coaster and I was terrified. I couldn't understand why I got on the roller coaster in the first place, but fear and panic were building as I slowly climbed up that first hill. I wanted off so bad, and I was trying to figure out a way to get off this roller coaster, but I'm sure you all know once that roller coaster starts moving, there's no getting off. I was absolutely scared stiff, but I realized, reluctantly, that the only way to get off was to ride it out. God showed me that I was on a journey like a roller coaster ride. It was going to be scary, and there would be many times that I would want to get off. But I needed to just ride it out, and eventually the ride would end. Now, my roller coaster ride included 2 biopsies, one of the tumors in the chest, another bone marrow biopsy, which was extremely painful, 12 treatments of chemotherapy, hair loss, pain, nausea, fatigue, medications, needles, tests, scans, x-rays, and the list went on. I even had to give myself injections for 6 days after every chemo because my white blood count wouldn't recover on its own.